So, this episode is part of a 10-ish message series commemorating the 10-year anniversary of when I first started my business back in the spring of 2013. Each message features a lesson or a story or something worth noting, a theme worth anchoring in from that particular year. Some are more life focused, some are more business focused, some cover lots of time, some cover very specific moments of time, and there's absolutely crossover because time travel is a thing in this retrospective mode where hindsight's 2023. Know that I would genuinely love to hear your feedback, any insights or questions that come up as you're listening, and I'm absolutely open to requests for future episodes to go deeper on any specifics that you'd love to hear more about. Just take a screenshot and tag me at Nikki Elledge Brown as you're listening, or hit the link in the comment box in the show notes and let me know. All right, here we go. After fighting it for almost all of 2016, in 2017, I finally gave myself more permission to let life lead the way, both in my personal life, but then also in my business. There was just a general softening, even of my body, like on all levels, there was a softening of letting life get more of my attention and letting that be okay, kind of surrendering to, but then actively opting in to be like, okay, things have shifted on the business front and how I want to show up. Now that I'm a mother of two, I have a different way that I want to spend my energy and different conversations that I want to be leading and engaging in. And so I was finally ready to spin the lazy Susan. I don't know if I've mentioned this to you before on the podcast. I've written about it like 5 drafts of the Naptime Empires book, but just in case I haven't mentioned it to you, I like to think about, instead of thinking about balance, I like to think about integrity. And I think about my highest values as like a lazy Susan, self, fam, and biz. And each of those have different connotations for me that they would for you. But usually most of my clients, their highest values fall into these categories. And so instead of thinking, okay, it's not a pie chart, it's not something that's a math equation or a ceiling fan that needs to be perfectly balanced. It's just about knowing what needs your attention at the moment and being okay with that, knowing it doesn't mean that the other meatballs are going to roll off the table. Like they'll get their turn, they'll get their spin. But in 2017, life needed more of my attention because we were going to be moving from Hawaii to Texas. There were so many transitions coming into play after being full-time active duty family to then shifting to, are we getting out completely? Are we doing the reserves? Like, what are we doing? Being far away from most of our family to being right up in the same neighborhood as most of our family. And I've talked about this in various episodes over at Naptime Empires too. But the main point here is that 2017 is when I finally let life lead the way, because I actually launched the Naptime Empires podcast. So even though 2016 on a business front felt kind of like wobbly, like I didn't have my sea legs now as a mom of two, I didn't know how I wanted to show up and la-di-da-di, I did know I wanted to explore this Naptime Empires conversation enough to put the feelers out, get all those survey responses, which still my favorite spreadsheet, do the photo shoot, get the site going, create a playground on Facebook where I could talk to people and share and actually start inviting friends to have conversations, recording those first solo episodes. So literally by the first week of 2017, the Naptime Empires podcast went live on Apple Podcasts, which was called iTunes at the time. Thought it would take a week or two, and it actually took like 13 hours, if I'm remembering correctly. And it was so beautiful because I was like, this is it. I talked about when your brand pants are too tight back at the very beginning of my business in 2013 about entrepreneurial muffin top. Like if your jeans are just too tight and it's uncomfortable and you either need to unbutton them or get a stretchy panel of some kind or just get a bigger size so you can feel comfortable. And that's how I felt in my business when I was painting myself into a creative corner, feeling like I could only do a song and dance if it was related to a skills-based how to. And I felt that from the very beginning. I don't think anyone who's been hanging out with me thought that or would have projected that onto me, like, boo, only talk about step-by-steps and recipes or whatever. But in my head, I felt like that's what I was, air quotes, supposed to do. So it was hard for me to acknowledge, no, I want to talk about the lifey stuff. I want to talk about carpool and childcare and how are we navigating this? And then how do you make time for decluttering and la-di-da-di-da? And I knew I wanted to talk about this stuff. And so 2017, there was just this general softening of my spirit. And later in the year when we moved, my actual physical body and being, but then also my messaging, because with Naptime Empires, I was baking in more breathing room for me to talk about not just businessy things, but also lifey and parenting things. So as I rolled out the Naptime Empires podcast, that first few months, I had 2 podcasts going live each week. One would be a solo episode and one would be a conversation with a friend, a biz buddy who also was building her own Naptime Empire. And in that time frame, I was actually serving clients for the first time, one-on-one clients that weren't copy related clients. It was like a holistic approach to their life and business integration. And that was so inspiring. And so I decided I was going to create what I called the Trimester of Awesome, which was a throwback to my 2015 lucky batch season when I was in my second trimester with my second son. I had a lot of energy. I really got so focused and so creative in terms of batching content and communicating regularly, planning promotions in advance and actually executing the promotions in advance. And that was my own personal trimester of awesome. So I wanted to bring that vibe and bring that energy into a group experience. But instead of just focusing on business, I wanted to spin that lazy Susan and focus on topics like a whole variety of themes, 12 themes at the time, that could fall into these categories of self, fam, and biz. So I'm going to read to you what these categories were. The group experience was, I wanted a small group, like less than 20, but big enough to where we would have fun conversations. And literally the whole point, there wasn't like an agenda where I was teaching anything, but I was just creating an experience and opportunities for us to focus on lifey things and actually look at, where am I with this particular area of life? Where do I want to be? What are the things I could do that would bridge the gap? And of those things, what's one simple thing I can absolutely do this week? Lather, rinse, repeat. And it was so delightful. It sold, air quotes, sold out. I didn't even have a sales page. I sent one email on the last day to my list, but it filled just through the Facebook group alone, because I was actually working on a sales page. And shout out to A Course About Copy. I actually used my own Work With Me page recipe from A Course About Copy. I remember sitting there in my home office in our house in Hawaii and typing it up, so I didn't have to overthink it. It's just like, who am I talking to and what are we doing and what's included and what questions might they have? And I was going through the recipe, and then my Naptime Empire site kept glitching. So I was like, okay, forget that. I'll just put it into a doc in the Facebook group. And that's what I did. That was my sales page for the Trimester of Awesome. And I had so many people sign up that, like, over that weekend, it was a Friday night, by the way, when I posted this. So if you have any beliefs around, I have to send it at this certain time on this certain day, that's actually not true. If you're actually really engaged with, and you have your metaphorical finger on the pulse of your people, and you know that y'all are on the same wavelength, it doesn't matter what time, like when you send this out. So that was a Friday night when I shared about the Trimester of Awesome. And then I had people enrolling, and then I was like, whoa, okay, I got to close the doors because I don't want too many people to sign up in here, because I wanted it to be an intimate experience. So I did send that one email out. So it was like the easiest, air quotes, launch experience after having so many beliefs and loaded things around what launching and promoting needed to look like. So that was another thing I loved about it. And then we had these topics, and then we would have calls, and mind you, life was taking center stage and we were moving and traveling back and forth right before closing on the house and things like that. So sometimes I didn't, like, the call schedule wasn't even set in advance at the time, but thankfully these dreamies were amazing, and they were flexible with that. But let me share with you what the different weekly themes were. So we had body, mind, spirit, love life, friends, fam, creativity, money, home, business, kids, and community. And honestly, over the years, I thought I could create this bank of all these different upgrade ideas. Like I call it the spark menu. And for each of these themes, or you could just do this as you're listening to this, but for each of these themes, just brainstorming a whole list of things that come to mind for you on things that you could do to just upgrade your relationship currently with any of these areas of life: your body, your mind, your spirit, your love life, whatever it is. And the whole goal, like I said, was to each week, here's our theme. Now make a list of kind of how it is now and how you want it to be. What's the list of things that will help you bridge the gap? And then what is one thing you are committed to doing this week to close the gap? It's like collapsing time and space. And that was the Trimester of Awesome. And it was awesome. And that's actually later on in the year. I hosted my first in-person retreat with a handful of these women, and it was just so fun and basically like a slumber party. And I was like, and my whole family's like, people are paying you to come basically have a slumber party. I was like, yeah, isn't that amazing? And it was. And I'm sharing it and anchoring it in as the theme of 2017 because it was so natural. It was literally just something I would have wanted to do anyway, but to actually get to do it in great company with these women. And if you're listening, love you, thank you. And wasn't it such a special moment in time for us to be able to do this work together? Because it didn't even feel like work. Like one of my clients, her thing for the home week was that she bought a new laundry hamper because the other one had been bugging her for so long, or it was broken, or maybe it didn't exist. But I remember her thing was, I bought a new laundry hamper, and it was such an upgrade for me, or with friends, maybe it was just texting a friend that you've been thinking about. And maybe it's not even that you're scheduling a dinner date or a lunch date or anything, but just texting the friend, like, what is one super simple thing that you can do that bridges the gap from where you are to where you want to be? And so that's the theme with the Trimester of Awesome. Like I said, I feel like it could be a book of its own or a DIY drip course where every week you get the prompts and I could share my whole banks of all of these different things just to give you ideas. But the most important and most valuable thing is for you to choose what actually moves the needle for you. And that is the bigger undercurrent of 2017. So we moved in the summer at the end of the school year, and then we moved into our house late that summer. We bought the house in the spring while Trimester of Awesome was going on, and then we moved in later in the summer, right as our oldest was going to be starting kindergarten. And then we had Hurricane Harvey, our hometown flooded, there was like so much that happened that is, I guess, a sidebar conversation, because really I wanted to focus here on the Trimester of Awesome piece. But even in that kind of example, talking about Hurricane Harvey, which happened literally the week after I had these 5 clients here, and I'm so thankful because we almost scheduled it for that week. And one of them was flying in from Europe, and it was like her first time leaving her baby, and she flew all the way here, and I was just so thankful that they weren't here for that. But nonetheless, even in those kinds of moments, it was like life needs your full attention in times of natural disaster or family emergency and unexpected things that actually happen. So it's in some ways unexpected, but in real life, we know that these things happen. So as much as we can do, make hay while things are relatively easier, then I recommend that we do that. I've talked about that in another episode. But life needed full attention then too, because it's like, emergency, what can we do to help our neighbors with what we have from where we are? And trusting that can be hard, especially when it's not necessarily something that you choose. But for me, like I said, in 2017, I knew I was going to be backing off of whatever pressure I had been putting on myself in 2016, trying to make fetch happen. And it just wasn't happening as much as I was trying to fake and force it. 2017, I finally let myself soften and be like, what do I even really, really, truly want to talk about? Because I know, there's a business model for literally like every topic under the sun. So I don't know why sometimes in this online business space, we kind of pretend like we have to talk about, we can only choose from these certain areas. But the thing is, what is going to come most naturally is actually going to be the most fulfilling for your heart and your bank account. That's my theory, and also my experience. And the Trimester of Awesome is one example of that. So 2017, shout out to you, shout out to every member of the Trimester of Awesome, and the next, because I ran it a few times. I even just did one actually in 2022, slightly different. But it was a delight to finally let myself play and acknowledge, I don't just want to talk about this one thing. I do want to let my life take center stage. If that's an issue for people, if I needed to schedule the calls on the fly, then that's not the right fit, and that's totally legit and okay. But I knew that I was owning that my life was changing. My own chosen identities were shifting, and it was time for my offers to reflect that. On that note, they continued to evolve in 2018 as my personal life started to like sink in, and what are our changes, and what are we actually doing, and what does this even mean for us, because the transition was tricky. So 2018, I'll be talking about that in Home Sweet Homeroom in terms of trying to find my sea legs here during such a huge season of transition. So I'll meet you in that one. Okay, technically that was the end of the episode, but since you're still here, one, I'd love to thank you for spending part of your day with me, and two, I'd love to ask you if you would take 30 seconds, maybe 60, to leave a rating and review in your podcast app before you tap out today. If you've already done that, it's amazing. Please send me a screenshot so I can thank you personally, and know that sharing this episode with a friend has the same magical powers, and I deeply appreciate both. Also, in case you're listening to the end to see if I ever actually introduce myself, hi! My name is Nikki Elledge Brown. I'm the host and author of Naptime Empires and this here On Her Terms podcast. You can find me around the internet at Nikki Elledge Brown in most places, but what you may appreciate most is actually over at onherterms.com. It's what I call the insider library. It's where you can get inside scoop, first listen rights, email updates every time there's a new episode, and then special insider only bonus content. It's all over in our private feed. Okay, that's a wrap for real. I'll meet you in the next episode.